fantasy short stories. Of Monsters and Mushrooms by Lesley Herron. Chapter 8, but Briggs saw it first. Trying to explain the process a mushroom underwent when sporing to a frantic mercenary was as productive as teaching quantum physics to a dog. Attila had ripped the glowing fungi off his body, nearly undressing himself, all while having a silent mental breakdown. Bruce went the logical route, informing the gangly merc that one only became a shambling, mindless zombie when the spore buildup became more than the body could handle. And after that, well, he offered up a toothy smile. You'll wander around till you find something high enough to climb, so when the little mushroom caps burst from your skull, they'll spread out on the wind and continue the cycle. He sighed. Nature's a beaut. Attila had not responded well to this. But the 15 minutes it took them to calm him down were a drop in the bucket of the 96 hours they had spent since then, silently shuffling over thin catwalks of stone and giant mushroom caps, or sleeping in huddled piles under thin blankets on the unforgiving ground, divvying out the scant few rations Bruce had brought among 6 people, 12 if you count Brig, had left them with hungry tummies and shortened tempers. And with each minute, hour, day that had passed, they were dogged by the terror that at any moment a wrong step or an unexpected sneeze would summon a torrential wave of multi-legged death upon them faster than you could say, "Oh my God, that worm ate Freddy." So, yeah, things could have been worse. They had settled camp for the evening atop the slimy, flat surface of a ginormous white parasol mushroom, nearly 30 feet in diameter. It smelled of dusty, wet socks worn by an aquaphobic ferret. Eric pulled up his hand, grimacing at the glowing ooze across his palm. Bruce had assured them that, despite all that, this was the safest option, pointing out that moving from cap to cap would deaden the vibrations of their passing, and that the worms were reluctant to climb the towering fungi. Ready to point out that a number of those many-legged creatures wouldn't need to climb to reach them, Eric hesitated. Speaking out loud might possibly summon the beasties, and he clamped down on his thoughts. "Another day of climbing, and we should reach the exit, boys." Bruce's whispered comment was loud enough to puncture said thoughts, and Eric peered over the edge in response. Several churning bodies rustled beneath them, their chitinous armor clacking, but they didn't stir, and he breathed a sigh of relief. He returned his attention to the small, smoldering fire that burned over dried-out mushroom husks. The acrid smell stung the lining of his nostrils as he leaned in, inspecting their soon-to-be meal.
You guys couldn't find anything else to cook? We're a bit limited on resources here.
Thel waved a hand at their surroundings, keeping his voice low.
And you're not allowed to complain when all you packed was a calculator. It's not like you brought anything either.
A hollow retort. Eric knew he sounded petulant, but in his excitement, he had left home with only a smattering of tools, scientific instruments, and a journal to document any new discoveries. Well, and also his toothbrush, but he kept that to himself, lest his brother pilfer it. The only ones with gear were the 3 mercs, and the insane crocodile, and most of what they carried was for killing, not eating.
Stop arguing. Besides, we did find something else.
Rick shot a glance between the brothers, then nodded down to the skillet sizzling over the meager fire.
Evan managed to wrangle up a handful of those bat thingies for some critter kebabs.
Leaning in closer, Eric frowned.
That doesn't look like kebabs. That is because this one here could burn water.
Brig jerked a thumb at the cyborg, overlooking the jab.
Crispy doesn't describe what he did to those. Now we're stuck with mushroom steaks. Again. By the way, be careful with that frying pan. It's a family heirloom.
Grimacing, Val reached into the hot skillet with his mechanical fingers and flipped the thick slice of mushroom over, revealing a deeply blackened surface. He looked up at the accusatory faces staring back at him.
Hey, I told you guys not to let me cook.
He held up his hands.
You're the ones that insisted it was my turn.
At least Arthur had been able to identify one of the many mushroom varieties as edible. Otherwise, they would still be enjoying cave mold, which everyone had agreed was worse than starvation. Attila reached over the tiny merc, who offered no complaint, and pulled the sliver of mushroom from the skillet. Grimacing slightly, he played hot potato with it until it was cool enough for him to take a massive bite from one end.
Crunch!
Mmm!
Snap!
The crispy exterior,
Crack!
really adds to the flavor.
He shrugged, scarfing the remainder of the meal, barely tasting it, which was probably for the best.
Add a little cheese, and you got yourself a 5-star meal.
Vel would have taken that as a compliment if it had come from anyone other than the man that gobbled a 5-pound bag of sugar-free gummy bears. He sighed, plastered on a fake appreciative smile, and grabbed another chunk of mushroom from beside him. He turned his ire on his brother, shooting him a look.
And I didn't pack anything because I was hauled here straight from my cell. What's your excuse? No food, no extra clothes, not even a weapon.
I did too pack weapons.
Eric sat up, his voice pitching for a moment, and he froze. The chittering and clacking below them shifted, growing, before it settled back into near silence. He lowered his voice back to a whisper and gestured to the gangly merc and his brick playhouse of a companion.
I paid for these two. They're protection enough.
Vel had barely rolled his eyes, ready to school his brother on his naivety, when a crack rang out, followed by a short but loud scream. The weight of all eyes snapping in his direction settled on Brig. He held up the overcooked mushroom brick in one hand and rubbed his cheek with the other. He spat out a broken molar, crying,
My tooth!
Scaly hands clamped around his mouth, silencing his outburst. The 6 of them froze where they sat, waiting with held breath. The chittering noises below rose angrily. Mandibles could be heard snapping open and closed, and spear-tip legs smacked against the stone floor. But after a heart-pounding 60 seconds, the noise reached a peak, then petered once more into silence. Bruce's hands fell away from the man's mouth, and he narrowed his eyes.
We need to move mushrooms.
He addressed the others, leaning over to pluck up Eugenia. He used the end of the shotgun to point at the next spongy landing.
Those little buggers probably have us sent now. Best we relocate, just to be safe.
Evan, who had been circling the perimeter of the mushroom crown, rejoined the others.
The croc's got a point.
Brig, still wide-eyed with shock that an actual sewer gator had got the jump on him, lifted up his charred hunk of fungi.
But what about our supper?
Flipping out the last burnt remnant of mushroom, Vel stood and stamped out the miserable little fire with his boot.
It'll be supper time for those things if we stay.
Attila smacked his buddy on the shoulder.
Come on, you and I both know you have snacks hidden somewhere. Just eat those.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Brig gave his companion a shifty-eyed look.
And even if I did, those are for an emergency.
Is this not an emergency? Less talking, more walking.
Bruce chuckled as he started unspooling a length of rope with a makeshift grappling hook at one end. He swung it around and around, gaining momentum, then loosed it towards the target mushroom cap. But the world tilted, sending the projectile off course.
Uh-oh, that's not good.
The ground beneath their feet rumbled, shaking violently and sending tremors rippling up through all their bodies. Evan dove to his belly, sliding over to the edge of the shroom, and stared down. He swallowed hard at the sight that nearly exorcised his soul from his body. One of the worms, looking more like an armored centipede than any worm he'd ever seen, was more than halfway up the stalk of their mushroom. Long antennae flickered out in front of the thing, guiding it further up the unstable trunk. Evan scurried back from the edge, no longer bothering to whisper as he shouted, "Cheese it!" Bruce swung his rope again, managing to sink the grapple into the soft, spongy flesh of the nearby landing. "Everyone, get ready to climb!" But before anyone could grab hold of the rope, a horrible, wet, tearing sound rent the air, followed by a muffled pop that echoed out like a gunshot. The ground tilted violently, and Eric and the others found themselves airborne. A hand flew out and caught Eric by his wrist, hauling him down so his back slammed into the spongy surface of the mushroom as the entire platform slid toward the unforgiving ground. He looked up to see his brother had anchored himself in place with his mechanical arm sunk deep into the cap's flesh, his other hand wrapped firmly around his. The others had done the same, Evan grabbing hold of Briggs' suspenders, and Attila's arms wrapped around the crocodile's tail as the lawn-sized mushroom top snapped away from its stalk and began free-falling. The worm had just reared its ugly face over the lip of their platform, its segmented jaws opening to reveal two grabby appendages that clacked against one another to create a terrifying death rattle. Unashamedly, Eric screamed in a pitch he hadn't been able to reach since middle school. Below, a tangled mass of chitinous bodies stared up at them in hungry anticipation, zipping towards them with horrifying speed. The impact of the ginormous mushroom slamming into the ground dislodged them all, sending their bodies flying off the rubbery surface. They were saved from the ravenous gullet of the worm as 11 tons of everyone's favorite pizza topping quickly buried it, and a large portion of the waiting horde. Eric found himself staring up at a glittering stalactite ceiling, attempting to force oxygen back into his lungs with shallow breaths. He could hear the muffled groans and moans from the others, telling him they had all survived. But time was not on their side. Despite the pain and the swimming of his vision, he shoved himself up on his elbows to see two things. A large swath of the worms had been decimated, evident by the green goop pooling from the twisted pile, and there were still several dozen enraged monsters that remained, stunned but unscathed. He glanced back up to where they had just fallen from. The next platform on their mushroom escape route had been a feasible jump from atop the previous one, but now there was nothing remotely close to connecting them. They would have to scale hundreds of feet just to reach the point where they had been, assuming they weren't eaten first. He'd have to calculate a new escape strategy. A metal hand gripped Eric by the back of his shirt and pulled him up out of his thoughts and the quickly spreading goop. Vel hauled his brother away from the oncoming swarm.
"Get behind me!"
They braced, but instead of charging them, the unaffected worms fell on their injured brethren, tearing into their armored plating to get at the squishy meat below. The tangle of bodies dissolved instantly into a feeding frenzy as they snapped and fought one another for the choicest morsels. Back on his feet, Bruce waved his stubby hands in the air to grab the other's attention, then paused. The noise from the roiling mass of crashing bodies was loud enough to cover up their presence, and he gave up trying to remain quiet. "There!" He pointed a finger in the direction of a steep rock wall peppered with crystal formations and sedan-sized mushrooms. "If we reach it, we could climb our way to freedom!" The group looked skeptically at the wall covered in razor-sharp protrusions and mushrooms that may or may not hold their weight, but with a lack of alternatives, and faced with the sheer carnage behind them, they all broke into a run. Severed legs and bits of goopy carapace rained down around them. High-speed clicking of mandibles reverberated off every surface, masking the sounds of their shoes slapping hard into stone ground. But still they ran, putting distance between themselves and certain death. The earth bucked beneath them as one of the creatures was flung bodily from the carnage, landing hard on the cavern floor. It chittered in anguished pain, several of its legs missing and large cracks webbing from one of its many tiny eye sockets. But as it rose to return to the fray, it paused, catching sense of something, and swiveled in the direction of 6 sets of feet running full tilt.
Ah, crap!
Brig put on another burst of speed, giving Bruce a pat on the shoulder as he sped past him.
Sorry, bud.
He didn't have to outrun the worm. He just had to outrun a tasty morsel. Oi! Not cool, mate! Glancing over his shoulder, Attila belted out a string of curses. Even injured, the worm plowed toward them with concerning speed. His first instinct? To use the long legs beneath him and run away, living to feast and fight another day. But a second, stronger instinct reared its head from the depths of his subconscious. The urge to show off. Falling to the back of the group, Attila held out his hand. Veronica, you know what to do! A thin mechanical arm slid free and deposited just what he needed. The lunchbox-sized device that he definitely hadn't been hiding from Brig this entire time. If the worms were attracted to the noise it made, even driven crazy by it, then maybe they would chase that instead. Don't worry, guys! Attila slammed to a stop and spun, facing down the creature that barreled in their direction. I got this. He flipped the switch on the back, waited for the resonating noise to ramp up, and, flashing a white grin and a sparkling wink, he lobbed the box away with all the force he could muster. Even he was impressed by his strength as the device sailed nearly 50 feet through the air. Attila, poised to release a victory whoop, dropped his hands as the box bounced, falling silent as it landed right on the power button. To his credit, the worm had turned its head to follow the brief distraction, telling Attila his plan would have worked. But as the others continued to run, the beast swiveled its attention back on them. He rolled up the sleeves of his poncho, ran a finger over his tongue to smooth out his eyebrows, and leaned in to charge. He could run that distance, no problem. Just pretend it's your dinner, but Brig saw it first. Like a bullet shot from a gun, Attila launched into motion, his long legs pumping to carry his body toward the box, arms flailing behind him to cut down on wind resistance. The paragon of athletic form. The interested worm turned, following his movements with a chorus of clattering armor, but he ignored it. He reached the box in a record 4.5 seconds and snatched it up, holding it above his head. Veronica reached out and stabbed the switch with a thin metal digit. But there was no victory to be had. Oh my god, that worm ate Freddy! Bruce stumbled back, his shotgun aimed shakily at the creature that had just slammed into Attila with its jaws wide enough to swallow him whole, leaving only a lone cowboy boot tumbling across the ground, the spur jingling pathetically.
Attila!
Brig, his head on a swivel in their mad retreat, had seen the whole thing. Without a second thought or any attempt to slow down, he performed a wide U-turn and charged the filthy insect. He screamed, flipping out his dual shooters and emptying the clips uselessly against its armored hide. Ignoring that the big man had attempted to leave him behind only moments ago, Bruce followed that feral wrecking ball, leveling Eugenia with a war cry of his own. "We need to help them!" Eric froze, turning to watch on as the pair approached the worm. Brig didn't stop, barreling right into its side with all his momentum instead.
No, we need to get out of here!
Vel grabbed his brother by the arm and started hauling him towards the wall.
What? We can't just leave them! Why not?
Vel gave his brother a cynical look.
They'd leave if it was you! They're mercs!
Eric managed to rip his arm free of his brother's grip.
No, they wouldn't! That's a horrible thing to say!
Once again perched on Vel's shoulder, Evan shrugged. No, he's got a point. Merc code is all about self-preservation first. Can't get paid if you's dead.
Well, then what about Bruce? What about him?
Eric slapped away his brother's attempts to wrangle a hold on him.
Aside from the fact that he is our companion, he's also the only one who knows the way out.
After a brief internal struggle, Vel let out a growl and shoved his brother away from the conflict.
Fine, I'll go help them, but you need to get to that wall. But just go. It's not like you could help anyway.
With that, Vel turned, Evan riding shotgun on his shoulder, and sprinted towards what he liked to call A really bad idea. Briggs screamed, red blurring his vision. Once his hand cannons had run dry, he launched himself onto the back of the creature, his brain in full feral mode. He alternated between chipping away at the worm's armored exoskeleton with his frying pan and attempting to pry its legs away from its body with his teeth. The worm lunged for the crocodile, only to have a metal fist slam into its mouth hard enough to snap off one of its 4 segmented jaws. It chittered angrily, rearing up to escape the new attacker. But Brig had leapt from his position onto the thing's back to grapple it around the segment closest to its head and hauled it back into the dirt. Evan took the opportunity to jump off Vel's shoulder, landing on the thing's face, and began jabbing his knives at its tiny eye sockets. He grunted as his blade glanced uselessly off the worm's thick armor. Straining with effort, Vel struggled to keep one of the creature's pointed feet from impaling him. The sharp edge grazed the flesh of his neck, and he felt the sensation of skin splitting. He summoned his mechanical strength, and, pulling with all his might, wrenched the bug's leg free from its body. He tossed it aside as the creature wailed in agony, green ichor spraying across Vel's face. They needed to finish this, and fast, before the other worms found them more entertaining than the feast. He had just opened his mouth to voice this when, crack! All thoughts turned to static white noise as the creature uncoiled and whipped into Vel, smacking him hard in the chest and skull, sending him skidding across the ground. Blood and dirt clogged his mouth as his vision popped with sparkling lights and black whirls. He coughed, pushing himself up as the world swam back into focus. The worm had risen up, readying itself to finish him off, Evan clinging to it like a bucking bronco.
Concussion detected. Immediate medical attention is recommended.
Vel swiped away the notification as the spinning of the ground beneath him slowed to a stop. He looked up in time to see a split maw above his head, ready to engulf him. "I got you, mate!" Bruce bolted between the two of them, spinning to swing his tail at the worm's head. The attack missed, and the mandible clamped down hard around the stocky crocodile. He shoved his hands into the roof of the creature's mouth and braced himself with a scream. The impact against the crocodile caught Vel with a shockwave, knocking him back several feet. He rolled to his side, spitting blood from his mouth as he attempted to climb to his knees, but failed. He caught sight of his brother running their way to help.
Damn it, Eric! I told you to get the hell out of here!
He tried once more to push off the ground, but his palms slipped in the dirt, and he slumped back. A glint of something snagged his attention, and he glanced over to see Bruce's beloved shotgun, Eugenia, laying on the ground, just out of his reach.
Never mind. Grab the 12-gauge.
Eric blinked. The what? Vel rolled to his side, barely missing one of the worm's legs as it speared the ground where he had been laying.
The big-ass gun!
Oh! Eric ran over to the combat shotgun, picking it up by the strap like some venomous serpent. Now what?
Now what?
Vel forced a knee under himself through pure will and exasperation.
Now shoot it!
Eric hesitated, then hoisted the butt of the gun into his shoulder.
You know I hate these things. Do you hate being alive?
One of the worm's thrashing legs slammed into Vel, catching him in his chest, and he wheezed, his mechanical hand taking the brunt of the force. Shoot the damn thing already! Evan, holding onto one of the creature's antennae for dear life, had finally managed to sink his dagger into a soft, squishy spot, enraging the beast further.
No need to get snippy,
Eric mumbled, lining up the shot. As he yanked back on the trigger, the unmistakable pain of his shoulder leaving its socket tore through him. The gun bucked, flying out of his hands, the shot missing entirely as he fell back. Those sharp, serrated grabby appendages finally managed to wrap around Bruce's middle, slicing through his uniform and digging painfully into his side. No rush, but I could use a little help. With a growl, Vel forced himself to his feet, half stumbling and half lunging for the worm's jaws. He grabbed hold of one of the bottom sets and began to haul down, straining as he slowly forced the creature's mouth open. But his flesh arm couldn't cope with the strain, and the mandible began to close, attempting to swallow their guide. In frustration, he slammed his mechanical fist into the side of the worm's head, and the thing exploded. Truly, it exploded. Following a cacophonous boom, chitin, brain matter, and green goop rained down from above and splattered them all. Evan and Bruce had been sent skyward, landing with sickening thumps in the growing puddle of worm guts, and Brig was knocked to his back beside Eric. Blinking, Vel shifted his gaze from the worm as it slumped fully dead to the ground to his mechanical fingers.
Did I do that?
A gangly figure slorped out of the gaping neck wound, covered in grins and a thick layer of green goop. Whew! That was awesome! Attila held up a gleaming gold pistol, planting a kiss on one side of the barrel. Holy cannoli! This thing packs a wallop! Evan caught sight of the shiny pea shooter and instantly recognized it as one of his granny's gold-plated chaos cannons, trademark, with thermobaric microcharge bullets. He scuttled away, tucking himself behind one of Vel's legs. Dude, be careful with that thing! Attila's eye focused in on the innocuous weapon. Oh, yeah, he could feel the power. His lips curled into an evil grin. No. Brig plucked something up out of the dirt and lobbed the merc's missing boot back at him.
Moron!
It bounced harmlessly off his head. Hey, guys! Bruce jumped to his feet, flinging goop from his eyes, and began shuffling away from where they all stood. He gestured behind him with a jab of his thumb as he broke out into a sprint. Run! Despite the ruckus of gunshots and Brig's feral howls, the tangle of cannibalistic worms had been too preoccupied to pay them any mind. But the explosion had been more than enough to regain their attention. And, as the group turned in unison, a chorus of screams rang out as they found the entire horde snaking toward them on millions of razor-sharp legs. The party bolted, running for the wall. Vel snapped Evan up, tossing him onto his shoulders like a child. Eric whined as he clutched his dislocated arm with his left. Attila began emptying his chaos cannon, trademark, into the swarm, turning several bugs into gloopy mist, but there were too many, and he failed to catch up to his buddy. Vel reached the wall first, swiveling to face his brother and clasped his hands into a foothold.
Climb! Shoulder?
Eric pointed at it with a grimace. Without asking permission, Vel reached over with his mechanical hand and roughly shoved his brother's joint back into place. The resulting squeal of pain forced a chuckle to bubble out of him. He glanced up, looking for the rest of their group. Brig and Attila were nearly upon them. But Bruce, with his stubby little legs, had been left behind, despite being the first to run off. The infestation was going to roll over him like a biblical flood. Cursing himself, Vel abandoned his brother and charged towards the crocodile. He had no plan, no ideas. There just wasn't enough time to think. He reached out his mechanical hand when the cavern quaked. The ground rippled and bucked, sending Vel into the dirt on his stomach. He looked up to see that Bruce had stalled, turning to stare open-mouthed behind him, where all of the worms were now retreating. Evan tugged at the cyborg's coat collar, urging him to move. Please tell me that was us! The far end of the cavern crumbled, stones and dust flying into the air as something with a head larger than a 2-story house emerged. It had obsidian chitinous armor with more spines and heavier than the others. And when it opened its mouth, clacking its mandibles, the wave of force rolled across the entire expanse like a tsunami. It slammed into them, pushing the others back into the wall and keeping Vel pinned to the ground. He shielded his eyes with his hand.
What the hell is that?
Bruce, frozen in place, had paled to a sickly shade of green. It's a brood, Mother. Given the distance and its size, the beast should not have been able to move so fast. But Vel had barely registered its motion when it rose into the air, shot forward, and landed with a crash that threatened to collapse the entire cavern ceiling, right where Bruce had been standing.
Oh my God! That thing ain't Bruce!
Eric shot Attila a quizzical look, then turned his attention on the dapper wrecking ball beside him.
So, you want to go save him?
Brig glanced down at his frying pan, then up at the monster, then back down. His mouth formed a line.
Nope.
Thank you for listening to Of Monsters and Mushrooms, the rewrite of Book 1 by Lesley Herron. Join us as we post new chapters roughly every other week. If you would like to listen to the entire book, or her other novels in the series, you can do so at talltaletv.com/series, or by using the link in the description.
Look, Brig, it's working!
Good job, buddy. Keep it up.
Excuse me, Brig.
Why, hello, Miss Ginger. Something I can do for you?
I'm just curious. Why on earth is Attila doing that?
What you mean?
What do I mean? He's running in the middle of the street, bent at the waist with his arms flapping out behind him. He looks like an idiot.
Yep.
I think I'm getting faster!
Yeah, you are. Oh, man. Yeah, I convinced him it was the most aerodynamic way to run, and he believed me.
Now, why would you go and do a thing like that, aside from him being Attila?
I caught the little weasel trying to convince me of some cockamamie conspiracy again. Harmless prank. He messes with me, I mess with him. It's kind of our thing.
I'm the fastest man alive!
To each their own, I guess. Just out of curiosity, what yarn did he try and sell you?
He tried to tell me the world was flat. Flat? I mean, what kind of idiot would believe that nonsense?
Flat Earth theory. No wonder you didn't buy it.
Right? I mean, how could the Earth be flat and hollow? It makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back inside.
Oh, that was fun. Oh, man. Where'd Ginger go?